we look at what we're called to do in imitation of his mercy. That we're called to be merciful. And being merciful is in many ways. Primarily, we can be merciful by having patience with others, especially when they tick us off, when they really irritate us or they're being a pain in the butt. We can be merciful, by having patience with them. But there's another way that we can be merciful, not just recognizing people's sins, but by an act of mercy. And this can be called a corporal work of mercy, something that we do, something physically that we do, that provides an act of mercy from the corporal works of mercy. And one of those things that we can do is something that we see in the Acts of the Apostles. We see that as the apostles are approaching Solomon's portico in Jerusalem, many people brought those who were sick. They believed that just by the shadow of St. Peter, the holiness that came from St. Peter, from our Lord, they believed that merely just by being in his shadow, they could be healed. And of course, these things would happen. And then we hear that all of these people who were coming from the towns in the vicinity, great numbers of men and women were being added to the believers in the Lord. They even carried the sick out into the streets and laid them on cots and mats, so that when Peter came by, at least his shadow might fall on one or another of them. So even the people who couldn't come themselves to St. Peter, others in their mercy for them brought them. They brought those who were unable to come themselves. And I focus on this because a big act of mercy that we can show to people in our parish or family members, especially those who you bring Holy Communion to, for those who bring Holy Communion to the Homebound. If that person is movable, that is, and a good indication of that is if they can leave their house for other things other than a doctor's appointment, then they are able to come to church, but they need somebody to bring them. So an act of mercy that I would really like to try to focus the parish on is that of bringing those to church. Maybe you can try once a month, maybe once a week. Think about people who live in your neighborhood that are either part of the parish or part of your family. It's an act of mercy to bring those who cannot come on their own, to bring them to Mass. Now, it's good that we bring Holy Communion to them, but it is much better if they come to Mass. Because remember, our requirement to go to Holy Mass is not to receive communion. It's to go to Holy Mass and to worship God. And that can't be done anywhere else. Those who cannot come because of no fault of their own, yes, they can make a spiritual communion. They can watch the Holy Mass, thankfully, on our live stream. They can watch it on EWTN, whatever it may be. But if they are able to come, they need somebody to bring them. And most of the time, they're not going to want to ask somebody to bring them. And so we need to reach out. We do have parishioners. There's a good parishioner who's a great example. She is good, but what I meant is she's a great example of how to do this. She brings on a regular basis 2 people to Holy Mass. Somebody who's very high up in her 90s and could never come on her own, but she is able to walk. She is able to get around. And another who is now a new parishioner after a few months ago, she brings her as well. They're not even related to her, but she just chooses to bring them out of the goodness of her heart. And she's able to bring them to Holy Mass. And that is the most important thing. Because, and this is also why, when we bring communion to the Homebound, remember, when the laity bring communion to the Homebound, that is an exception. And the reason for that is because I could never get to the amount of people that people bring the Eucharist to. There's no way I could get to that many people every week. I wouldn't be able to do anything else if I did that. And so that's why the church permits the laity to bring Holy Communion to the Homebound. But in order to try to keep that a little more, to make sure that we keep in mind the importance of going to Mass, and to make sure we have, so I can pull the reins in a little bit, as I'm supposed to do. If you are bringing communion to the Homebound, no more than once a week should you bring them to the Homebound. I mean, that's just a rule I'm making, because we need to try to also keep the emphasis that if somebody cannot receive the Eucharist and they need to have somebody bring the Eucharist to them, it's an extraordinary act already for a lay person to do that. And so once a week is absolutely acceptable, and that's a great gift. Most people may only receive once a month from those who visit the Homebound. So if I remember, I might tell you, has this person already received this week? And then I may say, okay, it would be limited to once a week per individual, not the person bringing Holy Communion to those who are homebound. So for most people, this is not going to affect anyone because the vast majority bring Holy Communion once a week already, and not more than that. There's a few people I told, because we really need to emphasize the connection between receiving communion and going to Holy Mass. And this does mean even those who cannot get to Mass and may not even be able to physically leave their house, that can be a difficult thing for them. But remember, most people are able to receive once a week because of their work schedules. So it's an act to be able to unite that with Jesus on the cross, to offer that desire, to grow in the desire as well, to receive the Holy Eucharist. And for those who are able to, I really want to encourage people, and we will be pursuing something. I don't know what it's going to look like, but the parishioner who already brings those people to Mass, she's agreed to kind of spearhead this, to try to find people, and I'll try to find people based on where you live and where somebody lives who is on our homebound list. If they're your family member, it's an obvious, you know where they live. But for those, I will look to try to match up people, and you might get a call from a parishioner asking if you'd be willing to bring somebody to Mass maybe once a month, maybe even once a week. Because those who are able to go to Mass and have a means to come are required to go to Mass. But as I said, they're probably not likely to want to ask you because they feel embarrassed and they feel like a burden. So the other way we're going to do it is we're going to have people call them and not really ask, but say, I would like to pick you up to come to Mass. And so the option is very clear to them that they're not a burden. So this is something we're going to pursue because if people can be brought to Holy Mass, that's what we should be doing rather than bringing the Eucharist to them. Now, of course, there's going to be people who can't physically leave the house easily, and let's say they only leave the house to go to the doctor. That's an understandable case if they can't be brought to Mass. But if they go to get their hair done, if they go to get their hair cut, they can go to Mass. I mean, that may sound funny, but that is absolutely true. If somebody can get their hair done, they can absolutely go to Mass, assuming that there's somebody to take them to Mass. It's not their responsibility if they have no way to get on their own. But this is where we come in. This is where we have an act of mercy. People brought those who were on the stretchers. They brought people who could not come on their own to St. Peter so that they could be healed. St. Peter, we don't even hear, doesn't mean he didn't, but we don't even hear about him going to every person's house to be healed. people brought them to St. Peter, and they received healing. And they could have never had that if others, out of love and mercy, didn't bring them. So, what we need to focus on, what I would like us to focus on as another stage of growth in the parish, is to pray about and ask for the generosity of heart, to be willing that if you get that call or you want to offer and let me know that you'd be willing to, that you'd be willing, if you're willing and able, or be open to it, be able to be willing to take somebody to Mass who does not have somebody to bring them. A lot of people's children who don't go to church don't think it's important to bring their parents to Mass, so they need to rely on somebody else to bring them. So please, be open to this. I want to ask the Lord to send generosity upon everyone here and upon our entire parish, to be open, to bring people to Holy Mass, because there is no way that they can most fully be part of the church, then there's no other way to do it as much as they can than going to Mass. That is the most direct way to be with the church, to come to our Lord in the holy sacrifice of the Mass.